Welcome to Michigan's WW1 Centennial News Report for September 2017, Michigan's Naval Militia. I'm your host, Dennis Skupinski. The State Report. On July 13, 2017, Governor Rick Snyder signed the bill creating the WW1 Centennial Commission. In October, his office plans to start appointing members to that commission. The uniform of Second Lieutenant Lynn W. Fry of the Field Artillery was put on a mannequin, and the mannequin was taken to the Marshall Street Armory in Lansing. Lynn W. Fry was a state architect during the 1920s for Michigan and designed 5 armories. One of them, the Marshall Armory, is a National Historic Place. On Saturday and Sunday, September 16th and 17th, Michigan's WW1 Centennial went to Greenfield Village during the Old Car Festival and set up a display to educate people on Michigan's WW1 Centennial. Also there were living history presenters portraying WW1 soldiers from Michigan. Just a reminder to check the latest events for Michigan's WW1 Centennial, please go to ww1cc.org/Michigan. A century ago, September 1917, Base Hospital 17 was the first organization to arrive at a station, where it functioned as an independent hospital until January 8, 1918. At Dijon, the unit was assigned to the Hospital of St. Ignace, which was French Auxiliary Hospital number 77. On August 21st, it started receiving American patients, but the hospital was not officially turned over to the American commanding officer until September 2nd, 1917. In September of 1917, Base Hospital 36 from Detroit College of Medicine and Surgery was being organized and equipped at the Michigan State Fairgrounds. At Fort MacArthur in Waco, Texas, the 125th and 126th Infantry of the Michigan National Guard were being trained along with the 119th Field Artillery. The 16th Regiment of Engineers Railway had arrived in France in August of 1917. They were stationed at Tilly in September, and they trained and drilled to be ready for their new assignments. On September 3, 1917, the most famous servicemen's center was opened in London, called the Eagle's Hut. It operated by the YMCA and was staffed by over 800 volunteer personnel, which offered overnight accommodations and food for American servicemen passing through London. The center additionally helped with arrangements for London sightseeing tours and entertainment. Turnover was heavy. In February 1919 alone, over 134,000 meals were served. The Eagle Hut remained open beyond armistice, finally closing its doors on August 25, 1919. September 3, 1917 marked the first night that London was bombed by German airplanes. Up until this time, it had only been bombed by Zeppelins. On September 6, 1917, French Captain Georges Guynemer shoots down his 54th German aircraft. On September 8, 1917, Russian General Kornilov heads a revolt against the Russian Provisional Government and marches on Petrograd. On September 10, 1917, Premier Alexander Kerensky assumes dictatorship of Russia and issues a proclamation declaring General Kornilov a traitor. September 13, 1917, General Kornilov's revolt collapses. On September 14, 1917, General Kornilov surrenders to the Provisional Government. On September 15, 1917, Russia proclaims a republic by the Provisional Government. On September 20, 1917, British forces assaulted the Polygon Woods, which was part of the Third Battle of Ypres, Belgium. The attack inflicted a severe blow on the German Fourth Army, causing many losses. Michigan Naval Militia was founded in 1893. During the Spanish-American War, members of the Michigan Naval Militia organized into the Michigan Naval Brigade, constituted the majority of the crew of the USS Yosemite. During the war, the Yosemite intercepted the Spanish steamer SS Antonio Lopez, beginning the Third Battle of San Juan. The Naval Militia remained active through World War I, included a division from the University of Michigan. During the war, the members of the Michigan Naval Militia served in the Naval Railway batteries on the Western Front. When the United States entered the war in April of 1917, the German Army had been using long-range heavy artillery that had a greater range than Allied artillery. The U.S. Navy's solution to the problem was to mount 14-inch naval guns on railway cars. The guns and railway cars were shipped unassembled to Saint-Nazaire, France. Rear Admiral, then Captain Charles P. Plunkett, U.S. Navy, became commander of the Naval Railway batteries. 500 enlisted men and 30 officers, 90% Navy Reserve sailors volunteered to man the batteries. Many sailors came from the Michigan State Naval Militia, which included Lieutenant Joseph Ralston Hayden, U.S. Naval Reserve Force, Commanding Officer of Battery 4, and Lieutenant J.L. Rogers, Commanding Officer of Battery No. 5. In the early summer of 1918, the Naval Railway battery crews began arriving at Saint-Nazaire to assemble the 5 battery trains and the staff train. Each battery train consisted of 15 cars, including the locomotive. The staff train included 8 cars. In August 1918, the naval batteries began deploying to the Western Front. Prior to the arrival of U.S. naval batteries, U.S. Army artillery units were supplied with French-made guns and ammunition. U.S. Naval Battery No. 2 fired the first American-made artillery shell from a U.S.-made gun on September 6, 1918. The guns were in high demand during the final months of the war, firing 782 rounds at strategic targets such as railway centers and troop concentration areas. On November 11, 1918, Battery 4 fired the last American shell 2 minutes before the armistice went into effect. The standard uniform for the U.S. Navy officer was a navy blue wool uniform. For enlisted personnel, it consisted of a navy blue wool uniform or white for the tropics. For the U.S. Marine Corps, they wore a dark olive wool uniform. The Naval Railway officer's uniform was a Marine Corps officer's uniform that was worn in France. It consisted of a dark wool pants and tunic. Pictured is Captain Charles Plunkett's uniform. The Naval Railway gunners in France wore Marine Corps dark green uniform with Navy rank and Navy collar brass. The 14-inch 50 caliber railway gun. They were spares from U.S. battleships and were mounted on railroad cars and operated by the U.S. Navy crews in France during the closing months of World War I. The railway portion was manufactured by Baldwin Locomotive Works. There were a total of 13 World War I naval guns produced. Each battery was composed of a locomotive, gun car, ammunition cars, supporting equipment cars, and accommodation cars for the crew, which were under the command of a U.S. Navy lieutenant. The shells were 14-inch diameter and weighed 1,400 pounds. Muzzle velocity was 2,800 feet per second, and the maximum firing range were 42,000 yards. The guns were used to target key infrastructure targets deep behind enemy lines, such as railway junctions and other lines of communication. Typically, they only opened fire after an Allied attack had begun to avoid giving the Germans any warnings of Allied intentions. Even though these guns were just introduced on the Western Front in 1918, they were obsolete before they fired their first shell. The airplane now could take over the role of strategic bombing deep within enemy territory. One of the other factors that made the naval artillery obsolescent was that its life was only 300 rounds before it needed to be refurbished. Therefore, it could only fire at strategic targets.